Hi everyone, Eric here with Whose Turn Board Games, and today I'm going to be showing you how to set up and play the game Stone Age. Now this is a 2 to 4 player game. It usually takes about an hour to 2 hours depending on how many people you have, and it is personally one of my favorites. I would say top 5 for sure. In Stone Age, you are a chieftain of a tribe and you work on sending your clan out in order to gather food, increase your technology, repopulate, as well as increase your agriculture. So let's get right into it. First things first, put your board in the middle of the play table for obvious reasons. And then, depending on the number of players, you're going to want to set up each of them with their own individual player cards. I'll set this up as if it was a 3-player game so you can see. So on the player board itself, it has 3 locations here for different tools and different upgrades. It has different housing developments down here. These don't actually matter, you can have multiple at the board itself. And then it also shows you the devising factor for each roll, depending on what you're going for. On this side, it does show you the multipliers for scoring, as well as for the actual science part of it. It's going to end up showing you what the factor will be. We'll get more into that a little bit later. Alright, you can set this up in any order you like. I'm just going to go ahead and start with what I usually do. I take the cards and I will generally shuffle them up a little bit. Make sure they're nice and shuffled because although it's random what everyone ends up getting, sometimes people like to sort them so they can be a little bit different. Once the cards have been shuffled, you place 4 of them face up in the card spots, and the rest of it will be face down in a pile next to the board. Now, up next are going to be the tech, or the tools. We call them tech, tools, really doesn't matter what they're called. There's going to be 2 separate piles. As you see, it's going to be 1 as well as 2 are on the same side. They're the same one, just opposite sides. So 1 pile is going to be for that. And then the 3s and the 4s will be face up for 3 on the second pile. Up next, you're going to find your food, and you're going to go ahead and give out every single player 12 food. Does not matter the denominations in which you do it. We like to do 5s and 1s. It could be literally 6 2s, whatever you'd like to do. The rest of the food will be placed over here in this section. There'll be a big circle. It's right above the wheat and between, I guess, the wheat column and the food or the wood. Put the rest of the food up there. You can keep it off to the side if you like, off the board. We generally just have it here as there is enough room for all of the food to be there. Now once people have chosen their color, you make sure that they have 5 workers on the player board themselves. 5 should be placed somewhere around their board, but off of it to be kind of off to the side to make sure that they know that they're not actually in play yet. You only start off with 5 and you can have a maximum of 10. Now with each color there should be a smaller and larger cube. The smaller one will go on the wheat track to keep track of what their wheat is at. The other one's going to be the point die. It's going to start at the 0 and the top right corner. Top left corner, I apologize, it's backwards. Next up, you take the building tiles face down and shuffle them in any way you see fit. You then place 7 in a pile face down for each number of players there are. So I'm setting up for a 3-player game. I'm going to set up 3 separate piles. They will each have 7. You can do it one at a time. You can do all 7 at once. You can really set it up however you would like. Just make sure that there are enough piles for the number of people, and there's 7 buildings in there. The remaining buildings will not be used, so they can be returned to the box. Next, you're going to take out all of your resources and place them in their appropriate piles. Again, there is enough room on the board overall for them to be on the board, so you can place them on the board. If you'd like to set them up in separate containers off to the side, you can do that as well, whatever you'd like to do. The game comes with a cup of sorts in order to roll the dice. There are 7 dice overall. These things are both awesome and annoying as all heck. You can use the dice that came with the game itself, or you can go ahead and make any 6-sided dice that you'd like, any combination if you have played other games with dice. If you collect dice, whatever you'd like to do. As such, this works out pretty well, so we like to use just this one. You are more than welcome to use whatever you'd like though. Now the last thing I want to talk about is the first player marker, the chieftain so to speak. This one, the rulebook says that the youngest player should play. One of our general practices is the least experienced person should go last, just so that way they can see the most of it. So if you're teaching someone new this game, I would recommend them going last, just so that way they can see how actions take place. As such, if everyone knows how to play it, we actually have a really fun way of starting this game. Roll all 7 dice. High score goes first. So that's set up. Players will take turns in a clockwise order, starting with the first player, and they will place their workers onto the board in some fashion. There are certain rules on how they place their workers out, which I will now go over. The first set, and this is very important, is in the village itself. There is the tool hut, the wheat field, and the love shack. That's what we call it. Sticking to it. Only 2 of these locations can be filled for a 3-player game. You take however many people there are in the game, in this instance 3, and you subtract 1, and that's the max number of these 3 that can be used. It doesn't matter in what order. It could be love shack and wheat field and tool, anything like that. Likewise, if it's a 2-player game, only 1 of these 3 spots can be filled. When all 4 people are playing, all 3 can be filled. Now, if you were to place your worker on this wheat field, when you activate its power, it will actually increase your number on the wheat track here on the side. What that does is that will make it so it costs 1 less food for your entire village to feed that time from there on out. The love shack. You place 2 workers on there, as there's 2 spots. You then, when you activate it, take one of your non-in-play meeples, which in this case Red has 4 or 5, and you place it face down. That just indicates that they were successful. And if you don't know what that means, ask your parents. You should know what that means. The last spot in the village is going to be the tool hut. When you go there and you activate it, you take a tool marker and you place it on your board. Tools let you increase your dice rolls by whatever number of tools you have. There's a little bit of a stipulation with this. You need to have all 3 of the spots filled with the number 1 before you can go to number 2. So what that means is that if this player were to have 3 here and yellow were to go on there again, indicating they get another tool, they then flip over a 1 to a 2. Likewise, all 3 of these need to be a 2 in order to go to a 3, and likewise for 4. We will oftentimes indicate that we have used it by simply just moving it out of the square space there, just like this, and then I would indicate that I've used 2 of my 3, and I can still add an extra 1 to any of my dice rolls that I have remaining. The only time you cannot add a dice roll to that is when you win a card, which I will go over here in a little bit. Now for the resources, there are certain rules on those, but ultimately there are 7 spots overall, which means there can only be a maximum of 7 workers in any combination of colors. The caveat is that you can only have the number of colors on there for the number of players minus 1. If red were to have 3 and yellow had 3, black, who is the 3rd player, cannot go on there. If there was 4 players, black could. As such, black cannot. In a 2-player game, literally just putting 1 person on wood blocks the other person from being able to go onto wood. Food has no limit whatsoever on the number of colors, the number of meeples on there. It can be all 40 if you want to, can be on food. Never seen it happen, don't think it'll live to see the day. The other caveat with resources is that once you have placed workers on there, you cannot add additional workers after that. So for here, red and yellow has done it, black cannot go on it at all. Yellow and red cannot add more workers even if they were to have them. Once you place them on that resource, however many you do, that's your number. As you saw, you can place as many workers as you want to at once on resources as well as on food. There's only 1 spot for the wheat and the tools, and you need the 2 for the love shack, which is why you have to set aside that many. It is the same thing with buildings. There's only 1 spot for buildings, so if red were to go on here, red could potentially try to build this one. Red does not need to be able to build it, they're just putting a guy on there to potentially be able to build it. The buildings are a little bit different too, as you see. They have a set number of resources, so 2 stone and a gold. If you were to have those resources and you pay for this particular hut, you get 16 points right away. Just go right up 16 points, put the hut at bottom of your plaque. There's the very simple one, this one, the 1 to 7 of any resource. You can literally dump any number of resources up to 7 in any combination. You get that many points, which is why there's a question mark there. Lastly, for this one, you need to have a total of 5 different resources, and you need to have 3 unique resources. That means that you could have 3 wood, 1 stone, and 1 brick. And it would net you however many points that is actually worth. The points themselves are actually on the card, so you can double check on that. In this particular instance, it would be 9, 4, 6, which is a total of 19 points. Now the last thing you can do on your turn for placing workers is buy a card. If you put the worker on any of the card spots over here, it does increase in value for resources based on where it's located. So the very first one costs 1 of any resource, which is why it has that symbol. Then it's 2, 3, and 4. Now the cards have 2 different things that have it. They have a top action and a bottom action. The top action is resolved immediately when the card is purchased. The bottom action is either a multiplier for the end of the game, or it's for science, which also has its own multiplier. Let's say, for example, red bought this first card here. This one has it, so you get to roll. This is a fun one. You take the number of players for dice, in this case 3, and you roll them. It shows you what you can potentially purchase with this. So, in this particular instance, whoever bought the card, here red, can take either 1 wheat because they rolled a 6, 1 gold because they rolled a 4, or 1 brick. They cannot take all 3, they can only take 1. In this instance, let's say red took wheat because that's the smart move. Then of course the next person, which would be black, took the 4, took the gold, and the yellow got stuck with the brick. Now other options for cards are the top one here, it just gives you an instant wheat. This gives you food, which you instantly pay, you collect and put onto your board. This one is a science, it's a temporary science. When it has a dice roll, you just roll 2 dice, and whatever the divider is for that particular resource is how many resources you get. You can add tools to that dice roll. Other examples for cards with the top part, they're a little bit different. This one, you take the top face down card from the deck and you add it to your pile. You do not get to roll, you do not get to use the top action. So if it was a +1 wheat, you would not get that. You only get the bottom action. It just gives you an extra card for a multiplier at the end of the game. So that's the top actions. Again, the bottom actions are going to be at the end of the game. So the green cards, as you see, there's 4 here that are face up. There's a total of 8. On the board itself, it does have what the multiplier is. It's basically the number of unique green cards you have in your hand squared. I had to think what the word was. It's been a while. Forgive me. For the other cards, it's going to be multipliers that based on how many points or how many things you have at the end of the game. This is the hut multiplier, so it's ×1 for every hut you have. This one is the wheat multiplier, so since there are 2 people on here, there would be ×2 for every wheat number that you're at. Here's going to be ×2 for every meeple or worker that you have. And here would be ×2 for every piece of tech or tool that you would have for that number. So those are the actions and what everything does for the game. As I said, you take turns placing all of your workers out. You can do 1 at a time if you'd like, or you can do as many as you want on any of the resources as long as there's space. Once everyone's placed all their workers out, then starting with the first player, they take all of their workers back in any order they like. This is very important because sometimes you'll have it where you need to roll on resources in order to be able to buy a specific hut. One thing I should mention is that rolling for resources, however many workers you have on there, that's how many dice you use. Now you take whatever the devising factor is on your board, so in this case it's 3 for wood, and you take your total number and you divide that by 3, round down, that's how many pieces of wood you get. So here for 10, I would get 3 pieces of wood. Once everybody's taking their workers back, you then reset the board. You take any cards that are remaining face up and you slide them down so they are then cheaper. You add more from the top of the deck, and then you flip any buildings that were purchased that stack up. You also need to feed your tribe every single turn. However many workers you have on your board that are active is the number of food you need to place. So for example, red here has 5, they need to pay 5. Now like I said, for wheat, you actually get that much food back, so technically it would cost, instead of 5, 4, so they get a refund of 1 since they do have 1 wheat. You cannot feed your workers with your food, you can feed them with resources. If a player is unable to feed their tribe either with food or with resources, they do lose 10 points for that round. As such, there's nothing in the rulebook about not being able to go negative. It's really house rules. I say, yes, you can go negative. You can't feed your people, there's something wrong with you. You deserve to go negative. And that's how turns are played. They keep going around, you pass the turn marker once everything's done, and you keep going until either one of 2 things happens. First, if a building pile is depleted, that is the end of the game. So once the last building is bought, for example this one, if it was the last building and it was purchased, that would be the last round of the game. Players would finish up all their actions and then they would tally up their score. Or if there are not enough cards to replace the 4 that are face up. And that's how you play Stone Age. It really is a great game. It's very simple once you start playing it, and it's It can be a lot of different things. There's no one way to win, and it's always depending on the luck of the die, because you have a lot of dice rolls. You could play really well with a lot of really good dice rolls and just completely dominate, or you could do somewhat poorly and still kind of win based on tech or what other people do. So it's a lot of fun. I really enjoy it. Hope you liked the video. If you did, go ahead and give it a like. If you want to see an actual playthrough of the game, we do have that on the channel as well. We will be working on that, one of the two. And check that out if you're kind of still confused on some of the rules. By all means, if you have any questions, leave a comment down below and I will do my best to answer them as fast as I can. If you like other board game content, that's kind of what we do, so consider subscribing and then hitting that bell so you get all the latest notifications on when we upload a video. Thank you all for watching. I've been Eric. Until next time. Whose turn?